Hello and welcome. You're watching News 9. I'm Shweta, Kothari. We're bringing you stories from the world of business, policy and economy. First up, we'll begin with markets as usual. On my left is my colleague Kartik Malhotra. Also joining us is Kush Bohra of kushbohra.com. Let me first go to Kartik. Kartik, markets opening on a flattish note this morning.
Flattish note, but a flattish positive note. I think indices are up. All major indices, broader markets in the green this morning, but by a second decimal point. So up 0.02, 0.03% or so. Nifty holding above the 19,400 mark. This is about 20 minutes ago, 9:40 when we took these figures. Sensex also well above the 65,000 range. Some indicators are suggesting that Nifty 50 could find some sort of a pivot at about 19,300 on the downside, but breaking through into the 20,000 figure still seems like a distant cry for the broader markets. Nifty Bank, Nifty IT, small cap, mid cap, all to a positive start this morning. Positive, but very, very marginally positive.
Right. 10 minutes into the market, the marginally positive seem to have turned into marginally negative. In fact, all major indices down by about 0.8%. Sensex down by about 0.08%. Nifty down
second
by
decimal point.
Second decimal point.
Very flattish. It's a very flat open for the markets this morning.
Let's quickly get Kush into this conversation. Kush, good morning. Thanks for joining us. What are you making of these, flattish sort of opening for the markets this morning?
Hey, very good morning. Well, if you ask me very honestly, this is in line with the expectations and what the data is suggesting. If I could have actually shown my my trading setup, my trading chart setup, the Nifty is in a very tight range of 300 points for the last 8 odd sessions, right? 19,250 on the downside and 19,550 on the upside. Now tomorrow, is the weekly expiry on Nifty and Bank Nifty both. So if you see the data setup, 19,400 call has a very strong base, and the Nifty seems to be respecting that for now. Similarly, 44,000 has a very on Bank Nifty has a very strong base for call and put both. So I think this is the pivotal range for Bank Nifty, at least up until tomorrow, give or take about 200, 250 odd points. Nifty also very similar. If we sustain above 19,400, 450 for let's say half a day, then you could see some kind of short covering, and 19,550 the resistance zone will come into play, but doesn't seem to be on the cards right now. But on the positive side, not everything's gloomy, even though the screen is red, even by marginal points. This doesn't feel so bad, right? I mean, as an investor, as a trader, this market, even if it's in a range or slightly negative, doesn't feel so bad, because the small cap and the mid cap are doing phenomenally well. And the kind of stock specific action we are seeing is extremely optimistic, extremely encouraging. So I don't think anyone's complaining just now, except for Nifty, Bank Nifty. Call and put buyers. The sellers are also happy in a market like this. So there's a very small segment of traders in the market who's perhaps feeling the pain. Otherwise, I don't think this is such a bad market.
Hi Kush, good morning. Nice to have you back on our show. Help us understand, I think next week seems to be a slightly more action-packed week for the markets, because 29th August is when the SEBI hearing at Supreme Court on the Adani Hindenburg saga is likely to happen. And then 31st March is when the government is likely to announce the Q1 GDP growth numbers. So what should be the strategy of investors this week?
It's actually very good to be back. I genuinely enjoy our conversations, right? I think the Adani saga is probably done and dusted, right? It's now a mere formality for the report to come out and any kind of outcomes to be discussed. Along the way they've been discussing what the story is like. Even if you look at the stocks, right? They seemed extremely volatile when the entire Hindenburg news came out, and they weren't really in flavor. In fact, for the last month and a half, that's changed completely. A lot of them have gone steady, and the rest of them have actually been quite positive. Even Adani Enterprises, the big boy FIC, for the last 2 sessions, it's finally crossed over its 200-day moving average after that whole debacle sort of started or came in, which was late Jan, early Feb. So after a good 4 or 5 months, 200-day moving average being crossed itself is a sign that slowly, steadily, gradually the stock's actually picking up. And some of the other names like ports and power have actually done phenomenally well. So I don't think there is going to be too much that will come out of that report, and we'll see any kind of adverse action on the stocks in any way. So maybe it's just an event, and someone would want to be a little watchful on these. But otherwise, I don't see anything major coming out of that. GDP number, yes. everyone's expecting, like a positive or an inline kind of a number. If there is any kind of a negative surprise, that's when the markets will perhaps react a little bit. But I think on the indices, there isn't, much action happening anyway. So, it will not be, a too detrimental a scenario on the indices front, given that, we are trading in that tight range. Also, I look for the levels, more so than the data right now. For me, the action is in the broader markets, and I'll stick to that.
Okay, and what about broader markets getting impacted by what is happening in the world? So, US inflation and China's deflation, of course, being critical concerns that are bound to have some sort of an impact on Indian broader markets, even if our data comes in line with the growth expectations. So, is that likely to play some sort of a party pooper for us?
Well, where's the impact? I mean, we knew the US banks are going to get downgraded, and that happened. Look at what's happening at our banking sector. PSU banks were in the flavor, last week. This time around, private banks are picking up, barring HDFC, for the moment. So, where's the impact? If I talk about China, in particular, the deflation story, the moment the news broke out, rather, we saw a bit of an impact in, the metal stocks, but the markets seem to be forgetting all these things rather fast, or maybe taking it in their stride is more like more like it. Because you look at the likes of Tata Steel, Hindalco, JSW Steel, most of these stocks are back to the levels where the downfall actually began once the news broke out. So decoupling is a very often used cliche word, but right now at least we are seeing some signs of decoupling, at least in the broader markets, and if not on the indices. So there might be some impact on the headline indices, but both the news, as far as the US action goes or the China action goes, doesn't seem to be playing out in the near term, and that is where I take some heart. Also, let me mention one more thing here. If you look at the FII data, they've been sellers consistently for the past 5 weeks now, and we track this data very actively from expiry to expiry. So for the past 4 expiries, I think even tomorrow, once the data is set, I think we'll have a negative figure. The markets are doing rather well, given that the FIs have still been net sellers. So taking heart from all this, the fact that the Indian markets seem to be in a steady position is actually very encouraging. So I'd suggest don't be in a hurry to book profits or get out just because the indices are trading in a narrow band.
Okay, you mentioned Adani stocks are going to get rid of their high beta volatility. Talk to us about JFS, JioFinancial. I don't know what to call it. It's gone by so many names, but this demerged entity listed as JioFin in the trade-to-trade segment. We are seeing some volatility there, and volatility only on the downside. I believe this is because of passive funds shedding the JFS stock. But what happens after this 10-day hiatus is over?
Kush, you're muted. Yes.
Yeah, some buying will eventually come in. It's very difficult to predict at what level will that buying come in. And, as a market strategist, the way I, look at myself, I wouldn't venture into it as long as the, the lower circuit is, in place. I wouldn't go out and say, okay, tomorrow we'll probably hit an upper circuit. In fact, what I would do is I'll wait for that upper circuit to come in, probably miss for a day or two and then enter. But I don't see a long-term issue with, the stock. Definitely, and as you rightly put, the passive fund selling is on, and it will be for some time. So I'll let the stock settle. But once it settles, and I think it should settle somewhere close to 180 odd levels. But that's just my calculation. Once it settles around that level, I would actually look for buying opportunities. But more than the price, I will look at the the daily action. Once I see an upper circuit on this, as I said, I'll probably give it a miss for a day, just to confirm that yes, the selling is indeed over. I will actually start accumulating, but not from a near-term perspective. At least from a 6 to 12-month perspective is where I will, look to enter into JioFinancialServices.
All right, and we've also got on our stocks board 2 interesting stocks that we've picked up today. Not that they are much in news this morning, but I think it's important to discuss Titan's acquisition of Carrot Lane, Titan being on a buying spree. And as a result of that, we've seen for some reason the Titan stock is actually in the red this morning. What seems to be the reason there? I'll come to the second company subsequently.
Sure. So, look, the stock's actually been a stupendous wealth creator over years. And, if I look at the recent move, which is again, mid-March, the stock was languishing somewhere around 2,300 odd levels. and then it made a dash all the way to 3200. So we've seen a good 40% kind of a return on this in the last few months itself. Now from there, if we are at 3050 kind of levels, this is at best what you'd call consolidation, right? So the stock has rebounded from lower levels of 2900s, trading comfortably above its key averages and the resistance zones of 3000. So for me, it's just a consolidation that's there on the stock. If I am a long-term investor, for me, Titan, Asian Paints, the likes of Bajaj Finance, most of these stocks actually are a buying opportunity on dips. So for me, this remains, a buy. As far as trading goes, sure, there is slumps, sluggishness, the momentum's missing. So I'll probably not pick it, from a trading perspective right now. But if I'm looking at it from, again, 6 to 12 months kind of horizon, I would be, looking to buy these dips for targets of 3300 plus, in the coming months.
Okay.
And we want to discuss the Carrot Lane story in detail, and we will do that. But on the back of that news, there doesn't seem to be any sort of positive movement as far as the stock prices is concerned. Could you explain and help us understand why is that?
So again, I largely cover stocks from a derivative and a technical standpoint. So what kind of impact it's got on numbers is something that I wouldn't have on me readily. So perhaps I'd give that conversation a miss just now.
Sure, absolutely.
So let's move into IPO space. Very interestingly, Kush, news coming in of DOMS. In fact, this had come about 2 weeks back, 3 weeks back, and we had covered this story. But finally, the papers have been filed with the market regulator SEBI, the draft red herring perspective. And there is likely to be a 1200 crore IPO launch for DOMS. This of course comes on the back of fresh issue of about 350 crore rupees and OFS aggregating to about 850 crores. Out of this 850 crores, 800 crores is from the corporate promoter FILA, while individual promoters are going to shed 25 crore rupees each of their shares worth. Now, talk to us about the stationery market. DOMS, of course, we know has been a brand, a company that has taken pretty much the Indian stationery market by storm.
Absolutely.
It's a new entrant, and hence, if we can go back to the stocks board, I had picked up one of the competitors, Camlin, which of course has been one of the only listed stationery brands that we've seen. Remember, Luxor and Hindustan Pencils, which make Natraj and Apsara, are unlisted companies. So on the back of this, a stationery brand, 29-30% of market share, taken the entire stationery market by storm. How does one look at this IPO? What do you expect from here?
So again, we've not started coverage on this one just yet, but what I can tell you from first-hand experience, I've got 2 kids, and most of their stationery does, indeed belong to DOMS. So yes, just from a very layman perspective, looks like a good market to be into, and perhaps could see good a good response. It's just that I've not had a chance to see the valuations. If I talk about Camlin, the only listed player, as you mentioned, the stock's also gone into a bit of a sideways consolidation, positive bias. But yeah, I will wait for some more data to come in, and perhaps once we've got our coverage in place is when I'll be able to guide you through this a little better.
But yeah, I think interesting you mentioned your children. You look young, so I'm assuming your children are still using pencils and erasers and sharpeners just like my daughter does. And you're right. I think it is fairly obvious. You go into a stationery store today, the entire variety available on display happens to be only DOMS. It's difficult to find a Natraj pencil or an Apsara pencil. It's DOMS, or it is the Chinese mechanical or sort of lead changing pencils available in the market. And going by that
I'm also
measure,
surprised by your extensive knowledge of the stationery market, Kartik, at this point in time. Personal experience
I've
there.
got personal experience and vested interest there. But yeah, I think, there's no doubt that DOMS has dominated the stationery market fairly extensively. And the quality is good. The pencil lid does not break when you sharpen. That used to be a very, very typical problem when we were growing up and using pencils every time. And the sharpeners fit well. The erasers erase well. So I think the quality has definitely been one of the reasons, and the price point has been similar to what we've seen in traditional products. So I think India's population growing, more children being born and going into school should continue to do well for DOMS, I believe.
Absolutely. And before we let you go, Kush, perhaps another bucket of stocks that you briefly touched upon, and that is the Adani stock. I want to specifically talk about Adani Power. We're looking at some sort of profit booking there in the stock this morning.
Well, again, look at the kind of run the stock seen in the last four sessions alone. 280 is where it was on the 18th. That is what, 4 sessions away, and from there all the way to 360. So the kind of run up that we've seen does warrant some sort of profit booking. Even if I look at it technically, on the RSI, on some of the other momentum indicators, the stock's very clearly gone into an overheated, overbought territory. In fact, it's a good thing that the stock seeing some profit booking creates an entry point for me somewhere close to 320 and 330 kind of zones. So I'm not at all surprised by this profit booking. But yes, this is one stock. If you would have asked me to pick one stock out of the entire stable, Adani Power would have been my pick. In fact, it was one of our picks, last week, and we'd recommended this to our advisory clients as well. So I will be, a buyer in this somewhere close to 320, 330 kind of zones. The entire power pack is actually doing, phenomenally well. No reason for this to not, contribute. So for sure, look for, a buying opportunity on dips. The profit booking today, or rather, the slip from the highs, this morning is just some profit booking that's come in, after the stupendous run that we've seen in the last 3 to 4 sessions.
Since you mentioned power, Kush, I just wanted to pick your brains on a stock like Suzlon or any other renewable energy as well, because Prime Minister Modi late last night India time at the BRICS Leader Forum, Business Leaders Forum, had mentioned India's strength and India's renewed push towards green energy, hydrogen, renewable energy. Is that likely to give some sort of a fillip to renewable energy stocks this morning?
I'm glad you brought this up, because I don't see this as just a 1 day or a 1 quarter kind of a trade. I see this as anywhere from a 3 to 5 year kind of a story. And since you've brought this up, I am extremely bullish on this entire space right now. About 2-3 years ago, when the entire defense story started, no one believed that these stocks could be the kind of multi-baggers that they are today. I think something similar can happen to the entire renewables, green energy space. A case in point is Suzlon. Let me just share. Let me just take a minute and share with you. This was a stock that languished in those single digits for the longest time, and this was perhaps like a trader's, a retail trader's dream. Okay, the stock's gone up to 10-12 rupees. Let's perhaps book some profits. But the recent move is so steady, so sharp, and so reliable. In the sense of that the volume and the price action, that this has actually become a stock which is there on the funds radar, on HNI's radar, and that is the kind of shift that we are seeing in the entire space.
All right, so I think renewable energy stocks, they're in radar, not just that of the leadership, the Prime Minister, but also I believe investors at this point in time, giving good returns for what the money's worth. Kush, appreciate you taking time out this morning. Thanks very much for joining in with your inputs. We will of course keep bringing you back as and when we can.